Welcome everyone, and welcome to today's webinar with Professor Constança Casquinho. I'm Rita Afonso. I'm part of the Executive Education team at Nova SBE, and I'm happy to be your host today. If you're following our campaign Role to Play, you know that we bring you one webinar a day. We're happy to have you live with us every day at 6 p.m. However, all webinars are recorded and available on our website roletoplay.novasbe.pt. On the technical side, on the bottom of your screen, you have a chat tool which you should only use to report any technical problem that you might have during the webinar. You also have a Q&A tool which we encourage you to use to pose questions to our guest speaker. It is my pleasure to introduce Constança Casquinho. She's assistant professor at Nova SBE and very well known on campus for the most out-of-the-box classes. Today she's going to bring us some insights about mindfulness, one of her areas of expertise, and how mindfulness can be a peaceful revolution. Welcome, Constança, and the stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Rita. It is a pleasure to be here with you today. Thank you so much to all the participants who are joining us today. It's a great privilege to be here with you. And maybe I will start with making the link with who we have today with us. So we are now seeing the results of our short poll, and quite a few of us practice regularly already. Quite a few of us will be the first, the first contact. Okay, so this is a nightmare for a professor, which is we have a very varied class in front of us, class of participants. So I hope I am going to be able to engage with you so that all of you feel like you've gained something out of the webinar. Wonderful that most of you would like to practice a few minutes during the webinar. So I was sharing with my colleagues earlier that talking about mindfulness and sharing a PowerPoint presentation about mindfulness is a little bit like us going to a restaurant, and instead of tasting the food, we are only read the menu, and then we can take home the menu with us, but we don't get to taste the food. So I would love us to practice a few minutes at the end of our session. So let's start with our agenda today, which is a little bit the menu. And I would like to discuss with you very briefly what is mindfulness. And me and the team, we chose that video of Braveheart to start our webinar today, because mindfulness is a lot like that hold moment. So mindfulness allows us to create a space between whatever we are observing and our action. So it allows us to create that space where we say hold to ourselves, and then we are able to choose how we're going to act instead of reacting. And these days, frankly, many times we feel almost as if we are being attacked by a huge army of news, information, and our system tends to react instead of acting. So let's explore a little bit what mindfulness is and how it can be helpful for us. So this is me, starting very briefly about me. I tend to put my students asleep, so in a way it's good that I don't see you today, so feel free to adopt my students' preferred position. I teach mindfulness at Nova. I'm very grateful for our board and their openness, our dean and our associate dean, who 6 years ago already allowed me to embark on this adventure of teaching mindfulness to our millennials and Gen Z. And this is me when I manage not to keep my students, not to put my students asleep. So I teach strategy consulting, and this is me with one of the wonderful classes. A few words that tend to guide my life. You will then be able to see this afterwards if you're interested. Just a couple of words. One is self-leadership. I believe that leadership starts with leading ourselves. And so I make it as a very conscious purpose to make sure that I work on leading myself so that I can be a good role model for my students. So what is mindfulness? So in 2014, mindfulness acquired this very known and almost a marketing hype when this lady appeared in the cover of Time magazine with the Mindful Revolution. So this was 2014 already. And then it very quickly spread to most of the biggest firms. You will have heard Google has a very famous mindfulness program, Search Inside Yourself, you name it, Amazon, Salesforce, LinkedIn, Twitter. And I just put this book here as almost an anecdote, as the author is a McKinsey partner, and McKinsey is my second alma mater. The first one is Nova, and I find it amazing, and I'm very grateful that McKinsey is teaching mindfulness to its consultants. So why all the hype about mindfulness now? Well, our brains, the primitive part of our brain, and big disclaimer here, I'm not a doctor nor a neuroscientist, so I talk about my experience and my research. And what neuroscientists tell us is that our brain still acts very much as if we were in the caves period. So we observe a potential threat, and our limbic system, our primitive system, reacts immediately so that we can fight, flight, run away, or freeze. So the gazelle has exactly the same type of limbic system, and the gazelle maybe once a day sees a lion, and its response is triggered once a day. With us, however, we live in the world where we are bombarded by stimuli, and our limbic system in our brain receives all this stimuli and categorizes it immediately as threatening or non-threatening. When it categorizes things as threatening, which we call stress, our system produces cortisol and adrenaline, amongst other substances, which tend to accumulate in our body because these days we are not able to run from the lion or to go and hunt our piece of food. So what happens is these days we are in offices or at home after our confinement, and we feel like there are so many requirements on our time very often simultaneously, and our primitive limbic system accumulates these cortisol and adrenaline substances so that many times our system gets out of regulation. And then in extreme cases, we have, unfortunately, cases of burnout. I would like to do an exercise with you. I think we still have the time. So if you could please get a piece of paper and a pen. And then if you could use your little, I think you can raise your hands. So if you could use those emojicons and just let me know if you have those, the pen and the paper with you, that would be excellent. Please. It's really difficult for me without feedback, but it's okay. I'll just observe it mindfully. I have Thank you, Isabel Cachola. Great. So one of us has a pen and a paper. Susana Felicio, thank you. Raquel, thank you. Wanda. Eugenio, my students are with us also. Carmen, querida Carmen, thank you. Catarina Oliveira, lovely to meet you here again. Has been so long. Wonderful. Okay, so Vasco. Okay, so a lot of us have a pen and a paper. Okay, so no cheating, please. No one is watching you, but I have superpowers, so I know if you're cheating. So let's do the following. With a pen and a paper, when I say start, you will start writing on the first sentence of your paper. Multitasking is excellent. And in a second line, the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way to 19. Thank you, George and Alfred. Okay, so when I say 3, we start. And then when you finish, the first one to finish, please tell me here on the chat that you're finished. So I'm counting the time, okay? So 1, 2, 3, start. So you write on the first sentence, multitasking is excellent. Second sentence, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the numbers all the way to 19. Anyone finished yet? We're at 20 seconds. Finished. Thank you. Okay, 27 seconds. 22nd to about 32. Good job. Okay, wonderful. Good job. Thank you. Now, the challenge continues. One more exercise, which is the following. We're going to write exactly the same thing. Multitasking is excellent. And 1, 2, 3, all the way to 19. However, we're going to do multitasking this time, which means the following. In fact, multitasking means not that we do a lot of things at the same time. Neuroscientists tell us. It means that we switch from task to task very quickly. We're on email, but then we look at the WhatsApp, and then we answer an SMS, and now that we're at home, we still answer one of our kids' questions. So we're going to have a metaphor for that by writing. Multitasking is excellent, 1, 2, 3, all the way to 19, but we're going to alternate. We're going to write M, and then the number 1. U, number 2. L, 3. All the way to the final letter and the final number, please. Is that clear? Yes. Thank you, Eugenio. Okay, thank you, Eunice. Beautiful. Okay, are we ready to start? Let me just make sure I mark the... When I say 3, 1, 2, 3, please start. Okay, I hope it's going really well. No pressure at all, but we are at 20 seconds already. "32 seconds already, which was the longest we took on the previous exercise. Okay, 40 seconds. Done? Okay, 40 seconds. Good job. Thank you. All right, so around 40 to 45 seconds. You will remember that the previous exercise was at 20 seconds. So, on top of the time, what has anything been different this time? So not only we took longer, anything, quality of output. Thank you, Eugenio, my brilliant student. It's great to have you, Eugenio. Rushed, exactly. And the quality of output. Maybe we noticed some mistakes, Confusing, says Antonia. Difficulty. Yeah. Okay, more focus would be needed. Okay, lovely. Thank you so much for the exercise. And so it's just a little metaphor. Of course, this is not the reality. So what is mindfulness? And I think my colleagues were totally right that I had too many slides. So wrapping up with this idea of what is mindfulness so that we can actually practice. So mindfulness appeared actually over 2,500 years ago in Asia, within the Buddhist tradition, and then it didn't take off in the West. I guess Buddha didn't have a marketing manager or a consultant, so it stayed as a quite a confined practice, and it used to be called Vipassana. Then what happened in the 1970s, and I'm very grateful for that, was that scientists in America, American scientists, in the 1970s, young students from Harvard, they started investigating Vipassana, several meditation techniques, but particularly Vipassana. So they went to India. Daniel Goleman is one of them. You might recall that he wrote Emotional Intelligence, and particularly a gentleman called John Kabat-Zinn, a Jewish American doctor, and he was so delighted by what he discovered while in India in his 20s that he came back to the United States and started teaching mindfulness. He created the name mindfulness at that time, started teaching Vipassana, a bit modified, without the Buddhist concept around it, but within an ethical perspective, and simplifying it so that it could be used by chronic pain patients. So that was a very successful endeavor. John Kabat-Zinn later wrote this book that I have here, Full Catastrophe Living. If any of you is interested in finding out more about mindfulness, this is a wonderful guide, and it is really the beginning of it all. And so mindfulness then from the 1970s started taking off in the West, and more recently, as you know, with the new companies, the large companies. So I think I'll wrap up this part with the definition of mindfulness that John Kabat-Zinn presents, and that is the same as presented in Vipassana, which is, I like this metaphor of a bird with two wings. One wing is paying deliberate attention to whatever is happening in the present moment. So a bit like Braveheart was doing, paying focused attention to what was happening without getting overwhelmed by the emotion of fear or the urge to move. So observing. And that observation has a quality, and that would be the other wing, of equanimity or non-judgment. So we refrain from judgment, at least for a few moments, so that we are able to see the situation as it reveals itself, instead of perceiving the situation with all the filters from the past. So unsurprisingly, mindfulness is very helpful for problem solving and for leadership, because it allows us to notice new things, and so it stops us from applying yesterday's solutions to today's problems. So on that note, I will ask my team if we can practice for a couple of minutes still. I'm reaching the 18 minutes, but I hope the team will allow us to practice a few minutes now. Just literally 2 minutes. Thank you, team. Great. Okay, so the suggestion is that we find a position where we are comfortable, yet we are alert. So we're not leaning back against a chair, or so ideally we have our body energized. It will help, especially in the beginning, to keep our mind alert. So sometimes in the mindfulness tradition, we use this expression of sitting with dignity, whatever dignity may mean to each of us. So it may help if we feel like someone is pulling us from top of the head, so we gain some space in the spine, elongating the vertebra. And if we are sitting on a chair, we make sure that the feet are firmly planted on the floor. So we sense the feet against the floor, there is a connection, we feel stable. And then at the same time, we feel like there's energy in the spine. And then we arrive, almost as if we were arriving to meet a dear friend. We allow ourselves to be fully with ourselves, fully present here. So maybe closing our eyes will help, so that we can get in touch with, what am I really feeling now? What is this body-mind system telling me now? Without judgment, with openness, almost as if we were looking outside of a window and observing the weather. And we notice, okay, so it's sunny today, or it's cloudy, or it's raining, or whatever it is, just observing. And maybe allowing ourselves to notice that right now, this moment is enough. Maybe this moment is enough, so we can give ourselves the gift of this space and time where we focus attention on ourselves. And one anchor that is always available and very simple to use is our breath. So we can use the breath as an anchor for our attention. So, because our minds are restless and they will bring all sorts of interesting thoughts that we should be concerned about right now. So what we have to do when we get out of the webinar, what we should have done. And so we gently, very gently, when we become aware of those thoughts, bring the attention back to the breath. And observing one inhalation. So just focusing on one inhalation from beginning to the end. Noticing. And at the end of the inhalation, maybe we notice a little gap before the exhalation starts. And then we can notice the exhalation. And with each inhalation, we have a new opportunity to start. A new opportunity to bring the attention to here and now. Almost as if we were in the gym strengthening our muscles. We are strengthening our attention, strengthening our focus. And this strengthening of attention and focus will allow us, when we are out of the formal practice, to create this hold space. Before we react to something, our attention will be trained on observing what is really going on here, without judgment, just observing. As if we are observing our breath. And on the next inhalation, we can interfere with the breath and exhale deeper. And then inhale again deeper. And on the next exhalation, gently open our eyes if they were closed. So we practiced for about 4 minutes. Thank you so much. And I'm delighted now I apologize to my team and to our participants that it took me a bit longer than the 18 minutes. And now I will be delighted to answer any questions you may have.
We don't have much time, Constanza, but we have some very interesting questions. We still have one last poll to launch before saying goodbye. We have Isabel Cachola asking, when you say attention without judgment, do you think that is fully achievable?
Rita, I thought we had agreed that you were only going to read the easy questions. That is a great and very tough question, Isabel. Do I think it is achievable? I think it is worth practicing. It is worth practicing. In my experience, Isabel, that's the only way I can answer you, is I notice myself making judgments. And the practice becomes noticing those judgments. And before those judgments become too strong that I can't stand that person anymore, the observation of the judgments acts almost as if it was rain on top of a fire. It dissipates the strength of the judgment. I give you a quick example. I went to the supermarket today and I found myself making terrible, very strong judgments about 3 or 4 people who were shouting that everyone should be wearing masks. And I caught myself making those judgments, and without my interference, that judgment of these people are shouting, why do they have to be shouting, everyone's so stressed, went on to, wow, this situation is creating a lot of tension in a lot of people. So my experience is that the judgments will still happen, but with focused attention, they lose their power, and they tend, in my experience, and research shows that too, to transform themselves into empathy. I don't know if that helps you, Isabel.
Unfortunately, we're running out of time. Giving the theme of the webinar, we prefer to introduce some practice instead of just talking about the subject, which I think it was very enriching, and we're now seeing the result of the poll, and I think you should be very happy, Constanza, as I think most people after this webinar are willing to invest a bit more time in deepening their knowledge on the subject. I don't know if you'd like to comment.
Could we keep the webinar running for a little while for those who want to stay, or do we need to really close it? Because I'm fine with time. If anyone has more questions, I'm very happy to address them. But I don't know if technically we need to close the webinar.
I think technically we need to close it.
This is why people sometimes do not appreciate working with me. It's because I tend to bend all the rules, or at least try to. Okay, I tried. So my next, thank you for the honest answer.
We can do a second webinar very soon.
Oh, thank you, Rita. And my second suggestion is, I think, can we share my email address with our participants? And
of course.
Shall I write it here, or maybe they can find it in the website, no? I can write it. I'm not sure. Thank you, Carmen. Thank you, Feliciana. Well,
thank you.
Please find my email address and let me know how your practice is going. And
thank you to everyone who has been with us live today. The webinar will be available on our website. Professor Constance's email is available on Nova SBE's website as well. We remain with the promise of a new mindfulness webinar very soon. Thank you all.
thank you so much. I'm being able to answer some questions privately. Rita, bending the rules again. Apologies. Thank you, great team. You're amazing. Thank you, participants. Please feel free to get in touch with me. On LinkedIn also, it's very easy to reach me.